It's a real honor and privilege to represent my organization, the Congress of Racial Equality, a 68-year-old civil and human rights organization. It's an honor and privilege to be here with so many of my colleagues and so many of my friends, as Michael said, or I suppose as Harry Reid might say, all these Negroes. Did I say that? Little history lesson. At the end of the Civil War, during the Reconstruction period, white supremacists, incidentally Democrats back then, in order to hold on to power, would do something they called wave the bloody shirt. Wave it to remind Southerners of the Civil War and to intimidate newly freed and newly enfranchised African Americans, Black Americans. That racially charged tactic would be used in the South for nearly a century more. It would be used to maintain power and to intimidate voters, both white and black, in the South. This is a racial tactic, a terror tactic, that would be challenged by many Americans, including the NAACP. It would lead to the great Civil Rights Revolution, which my father and my chairman, Roy Innis, has said is the greatest peaceful, relatively peaceful, social movement in the history of man. And that civil rights movement would radically and dramatically swing the racial pendulum. So now, the word racism and being called a racist is the single most damaging charge for any American. And because of this new environment and new phenomenon, the NAACP, in a betrayal of its own legacy and in the legacy of Black Americans, has now adopted the same tactic that they were formed to fight in the first place, that racial terror. It is the same racial terror that was employed by whites in hoods. It is now being employed by blacks and whites in suits. The victims now are Americans that just want to exercise their First Amendment rights. Members of the Tea Party movement, leaders of the Tea Party movement. I have been to, as my colleagues, many of my colleagues, have been to dozens of Tea Parties across the country. Warmly received, like a family reunion. An incredible movement that echoes grassroots movements going back to the abolitionist movement, to the women's suffrage movement, to the anti-Vietnam War movement, to the civil rights revolution. If we all recall, the ground zero for this racism charge against the Tea Party movement was the rallies against the health care legislation on Capitol Hill. And it was the fraudulent and phony charge issued by the Congressional Black Caucus, or some clueless members of the Congressional Black Caucus, that alleged that the N-word was dropped and that people were purposefully spit upon. Well, one of the various Tea Party organizations issued a letter. In that letter to the Congressional Black Caucus, they said that we take very seriously any charge of racism within our ranks. In that letter, they said, and as a part of their charter, they condemn racism. And in that letter, they asked the Congressional Black Caucus to join them in an investigation so that they could provide a strange word, evidence of this alleged racism. Do you know, my friends, that the Congressional Black Caucus has yet to respond to this letter from the Tea Party movement? Listen, this political game, and that's what it is, it's not done for black people. It's not done for members of the NAACP. And let me say, the Congress of Racial Equality is a grandchild of the NAACP. A lot of civil rights organizations came out of the NAACP. I have nothing but respect for the tradition of the NAACP. but I have nothing but contempt for the current leadership and the tactics that they are employing today. So I call on the decent members of the NAACP to end the racial terror tactics and the prostitution of Black America's legacy to our country. I call on decent white liberals. There are some out there. Decent white liberals who see their tradition, mark their tradition back to Hubert Humphrey, not to Al Sharpton, to stop these tactics. The Tea Party movement is a wonderful movement that welcomes all colors, all races to join their ranks. I've not only been invited to dozens of tea parties, I am the Tea Party. So God bless you, and thank you for being here today.